Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second week of Tending the Commons. I'm Jen Curtis, and I will share with you the embroidery of the week as we wait for people to sign in and get settled in. We usually start with the embroidery of the week, and then we do a popcorn share of what we're working on. So let me just share with you first the embroidery of the week, which I thought was just extraordinary. It's the Mycelium Carbon Network Exchange. And what I really loved about this one was the simplicity and the color and how it had so much depth and rhythm to it. I just thought it was just extraordinary. It just kind of had such a great three-dimensional look to it. And like I said, I'm Jen, and I use she, her pronouns. And tonight I am going to be continuing my yellow rumped warbler. Just now getting into the section of the bird, and I am going to pass it to DeRainer.
Hi, DeRainer Holland. I go by she, her pronoun. I'm actually calling from Century City right now, and I don't have my embroidery right now. But it is one of the underground patterns, and excited to be here tonight for tonight's reading. And I will pass it to, I can't see who, I'm on my phone right now. My computer died, so Jen, if you could popcorn it to someone for me. I can't
I'll
see.
take it.
Thank you.
My name's Cindy. I'm calling in from West Covina. I'm going to be working on the Raven tonight. And I haven't started, but I'll start that tonight. And I will pass it along to Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna. I use they, them pronouns. I'm calling from Pitch Black Martha's Vineyard on the East Coast. I'm working on a bumblebee tonight. I will pass it along to Emily.
Hi, welcome Anna, and welcome everyone. Emily here in Echo Park, Los Angeles neighborhood, and she, her pronouns. Very happy to be with you all. This is my kind of sanctuary time each week, and it's such a gentle and supportive space that we all create together. Happy to be here with you. Tonight I'm going to be listening and also doing some sonic meditation for all of us just right after the reading before we go into discussion. And I'm very excited to be here. So let me pass it on to Ansu.
Hi, everyone. I loved Emily's words. This is a lovely time of the week for me as well, and so pleased to join everyone. I'm calling in from Eagle Rock, also a neighborhood in Los Angeles, go by she, her pronouns, and I'm inching forward on I'm so close, but I haven't quite done that basket stitch that you showed last or 2 weeks ago, Jen, and I want to do that for the boundary. Oh, yeah. So before I send it to you, I will do that. And I am going to pass it, bop it over to Olan. Or did you go?
No, I didn't. Thank you, Ansu. Yes, this is Olan. I'm in West Hollywood. I'm working on this. I've become completely obsessed with filling in every little freaking stitch.
Wow.
Wow, can you hold that back up? I need to get another look.
Yeah,
it's so beautiful.
Wow.
Oh,
That's
God.
amazing.
I love all the work
Amazing.
you do.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
beautiful.
thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be here too. I've missed a couple and and I will pass this to Cecile.
Hi, I'm just joining in. This is my first session. I'm calling in from San Juan, Puerto Rico. I just got my kid, so I'm really looking forward to starting on it, particularly since I used to do that with my grandmother when I was little. So I'm really looking forward to rethinking and be inspired once again from all those childhood memories that I had. Thank you. And I will pass it on to Linda.
Great, thanks. I'm so happy to be here. I'm Linda Gass, and I go by she, her pronouns. And I'm located in the San Francisco Bay Area on the ancestral land of the Prushan in a city that's now known as Los Altos. And last week was my very first time, and I enjoyed it so much. I'm back, and I'm also very excited because recently my kit arrived, and I would love to know what this design is, so that I just would I would enjoy knowing what it is while I'm stitching on it. Can somebody tell me what it is?
That looks like I'm trying to pin it. It looks like a mycelium carbon network exchange, but
Great.
I'll look if you need a reference image, I can send you one.
Oh, that would be great.
Okay.
So I will pass this on to Claudia.
Perfect.
You are muted.
Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm here the first time today. I'm very excited. And I just started with the Raven, which I'm going to do in collaboration with my daughter, who's much better at embroidering than I am. So we'll see how it turns out. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you. I'm passing on to Kavi.
Thanks, Claudia. Hi, everyone. Kavi Lal. I use he, him pronouns, located in Sacramento on Miwok lands. Tonight, I'll be listening in, reading along, and sharing the screen. Really looking forward to the reading tonight. And I'll pass it on to Marianne.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marianne Maley. I'm in Silver Lake in Los Angeles. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm working on this for a while now. I've been traveling, so it's great to be back with you all. And Olan, you really inspired me. Now I want to fill it in, but I don't know how much time that takes.
It's a slippery slope, I'll tell you.
Yeah, because once you start, you got to go for it.
Yeah, I know. I thought, ooh, that could get really dense and intense. So let's see. I have Emily's gone. Izzy, have you spoken?
No, I have not yet.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Izzy. My pronouns are they, she. I'm calling in from East Hollywood. And tonight I will be working on this never-ending mycelium network. And yes, I will also be guiding some breath work and helping out with the discussion. Yeah, I'm really excited. So I will call on Lauren, if you can talk.
I can. Hello, everybody. I just got off an airplane. I'm in a car entering the city of Chicago. And I'm so happy to be here. So happy to be here and able to listen in and share arriving with all of you. So I will pass it on to Walker, whose daughter I will see tomorrow morning. I mean, whose son I will see tomorrow morning. Sorry, I'm having a hard time with pronouns these days.
We all do sometimes. I'm Walker. I'm calling in from Baja California in Kumeyaay land. I use she, her pronouns, And I'm still working on my little microbial people.
Beautiful.
And listening
beautiful.
to the acorns fall on my roof is such a beautiful sound. And I will pass it on to who hasn't had a turn yet. What about Kaz? Someone named Kaz? Maybe that person's not there.
I'm
I
here.
see their picture.
Sorry,
Oh,
it took
did
me a while to unmute my audio. Greetings from the Mojave Desert. I'm Kaz. I'm she, her pronouns. I am working on some mushrooms today. And I'm really tempted to fill in the whole background, like, hold on, but yeah, there's a lot of background with these mushrooms, so I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do that. But I'm really grateful to be here with all of you today, and look forward to our conversation. And I don't know, Ansu, have you gone? You did.
I have gone, yeah.
Millie?
Hi everyone, I'm Millie. I use she, her pronouns. I'm in Glassell Park, and today I'm going to be doing some designs to get inspired for Day of the Dead. So yeah, it's going to be a great evening, and I'm really looking forward to today's reading. I will pass it back to Jen. I believe we're done, right? Cool.
Yes, thank you. Again, welcome everybody to Learning and Mending, Tending the Commons. This is the second week. In this series, Tending the Commons, we will be exploring how the commons can be an alternative approach to the destructive nature of capitalism, where individual and short-term gains have been prioritized over the common and long-term good. We will be asking questions like, what are the commons and what does this look like? How do social relations shift within the commons? In what ways do the commons resist the simulated scarcity of capitalism? This is the 6th iteration of Learning and Mending, following syllabi on abolitionist writing, indigenous perspectives of land stewardship, suffocation, Anna Tsing's The Mushrooms at the End of the World, and systems thinking. In many ways, this series is a continuation of what preceded it. We've examined alternatives to capitalism and its destructive, corrosive nature in the previous syllabi. But in this series, we are specifically looking at the alternative to capitalism that is the commons. Many of you have received embroidery kits from us of native plants, birds, and microscopic organisms that Metabolic Studio is currently cultivating on its project sites. Taken as a collection, all the embroideries will collectively illustrate biogeoconosis, which describes the intimate association between living things and the physical environment. If you've not received an embroidery kit, or you would like another one, please send your name and mailing address to info@metabolicstudio.org. Cindy will put that in the chat bar. And it's so wonderful to see everybody that has received theirs in the last week, and I'm looking forward to seeing where you go with them. I will also be putting in the chat bar each week different stitches, a PDF that illustrates a new stitch that you might want to try. Tonight, we will share our screen, and we encourage you to read a section of the text aloud with us. When there is a pause in the reading, please feel free to unmute yourself and begin where the last person left off. Silence is golden, and there's no pressure to fill the transitional spaces while we enjoy a breath and continue crafting. Feel free to jump in and continue reading at your comfort level. You don't have to read, it's also fine to enjoy listening. And now I will pass it over to Izzy, and she will introduce tonight's readings.
Thank you, Jen. So before we get into the readings for tonight, I want to guide some breath work. And tonight's breath work is, because the readings will be about trees and roots, the breath work is kind of guided toward grounding and rooting. So if you can find yourself in a comfortable seated position, And if available to you, place your feet on the ground. And close your eyes. Take a deep inhale. Exhale. Inhale. And as you exhale, imagine roots extending into the earth out of your feet, feeling supported and grounded. In your grounded state, take a deep inhale, inviting the energy from the earth up into the palms of your feet, receiving this breath as an energizing force of life. And as you exhale, imagine your roots extending further, deepening, widening, supporting. Inhale, drawing your breath into center. Exhale, let your feet feel heavy. Let yourself relax. Connecting with the earth on each inhale. Deepening on each exhale. Your breath moving down and across, deepening and energizing. With your next in and out breath, soften the eyes, relax the jaw and the mouth, and let your shoulders fall away from your ears. Inhale and feel the tension melt away from your face, your shoulders melt down as you relax deeper and deeper, becoming more grounded. Exhale, expanding out, relaxing outward. Take another deep inhale. Exhale, begin to open your eyes. Returning back to Zoom. Okay, thanks everyone for participating. So tonight we're reading Shree's More Than Human Collectives by Boyana Pisker. She's a writer and curator at the Museum of Modern Art in Ljubljana. And her work focuses on topics related to the former Yugoslavia, such as experimental film, political performance, and the non-aligned movement. And in Shree's More Than Human Collectives, Pisker challenges the boundary between human and non-human through a critique of forest management and deforestation. She invites the reader to question inherited categories of life, adopting a notion of solidarity that reaches across the human and non-human divide. The solidarity of what she calls being present in the other. This view of solidarity is a tactic that recognizes more than human modes of life while resisting anthropomorphic tendencies in order to move toward a new environmental politics that emphasizes the collective of more than human beings that are prioritized over the individual interests of humans. Again, this week I will be putting in the chat a glossary of terms and key concepts building off of last week. So you'll see there will be the week 1 terms, and then if you scroll down a little bit further, there will be this week's terms, because some terms such as rhizomatic carry through this week, and we'll see that throughout the series, a lot of overlap between the terms. So it'll be a cumulative glossary. Yeah, and feel free to bring up any questions you have about the terms or if you want to talk about them in the discussion period. So next up is Kavi with the screen share. And I will put the glossary in the chat now.
I guess I could start. Trees more than human collectives. Since growing up in a small village in the south of Slovenia in the 1970s, I have always been surrounded by forests. Our family has owned forests for generations. My father and my siblings have studied forestry, and my grandmother was known in the village for her herbal medicine skills. My father was one of the researchers of the Pečka Virgin Forest nearby, a very special reserve that includes majestic fir and beech trees. For us, back then, forests were not scary places where one would get lost or die. Throughout history, forests have provided an abundance of food and resources, berries, nuts, mushrooms, beech juice, and animals too. Forests have always been a kind of refuge for humans and non-humans alike. During the Second World War, forests protected Yugoslav partisans who were fighting for freedom against the occupying forces. Partisans built hospitals and schools, printed books, and even organized art events in the forests, which provided them with shelter and privacy. There was a special comradeship between forests and partisans. It is not a coincidence that a famous partisan hymn begins, "In the forests and the mountains of our proud country, partisan troops are marching, spreading the glory of struggle." About a decade ago, in a place distant from Slovenia, the writer Arundhati Roy spent some time walking with comrades through the dense forests of Dandakaranya in central India. These comrades were a troop of indigenous rebels hailing from the Gond, Halba, and Muria tribal communities, and they were fighting state-backed exploitation, including the destruction of forests, lands, and water. Roy describes how the Indian state's institutionalizing of injustice affected these groups. The Dandakaranya forest has been a highly contested space for decades because the corporate appetite for minerals and other resources remains limitless. The tribal communities of the Dandakaranya forest, as well as the tribal communities of the Amazon, like the Kayapo, the Araraquara, and many others, have been defending rainforests for a long time. Many indigenous people living in forests have a specific relation to non-humans there. Often, they do not distinguish between humans and non-humans. For these communities, deforestation means losing not only their ancestral home, but also their source of knowledge. The communities living in close relation with these woodlands are aware that by exploiting forest resources, it is not only human lives that are ruined, but all other life that depends on the forests. Humans that are closely entangled with non-human environments and attentive to non-human life do not need to theorize about any nature-culture division. For others, the concept of non-human life and the idea of a more equal or just relation to it causes considerable difficulties.
Recent criticism has focused on the way non-humans are included in discussions of nature, ecology, and climate change. This critique says that speaking for the non-human is unproductive and thinking on their behalf only supports existing humanist ideologies that anthropomorphize and patronize other species. Astrida Jimenez, for one, has written about the ways that non-human others are represented. She poses a representation without colonization, pointing to the questionable ethics and politics of humans who position themselves as spokespeople for non-human beings. Other critics claim that in the current political situation, with the rise of fascism, human rights violations, new wars, displacement, and migration, times are not ripe for discussions on non-human life. With the pandemic, it has become clear that humanity itself is in deep trouble. Perhaps humans must first solve their own problems, but the problems of humans are the problems of non-humans and vice versa. As the inhabitants of India's Dandakaranya forest and many other communities living close to forest have always known, everything on the, it's a little delayed here. Planet is intertwined and life in all its dimensions cannot be separated. Humans from non-humans, nature from culture, object from subject, mind from body. As a child, I was taught that every single species, even the smallest, has a place in the forest, and humans have no right to destroy that ecological equilibrium. There's no good or bad in the forest. Everything there is just the way it should be. And there's no need for human intervention. This is especially the case with virgin old-growth forests. Dusan Linsek, a forest researcher from Slovenia, spoke in the 1980s about the true nature of a forest. For him, this true nature could be best observed in a virgin forest, an ecological space eternally growing in cyclical patterns where the death and life are intertwined. In other forests where humans have intervened, such cycles are not so visible. Since dead trees are cleared and new ones planted, in an old growth forest, a dead tree can be more abundant with life than a living tree. A forest is not the sum of its tree parts. It's more than just that, an ecosystem based on complex intertwined relationships among plants, animals, fungi, bacteria, and other organisms.
We need to learn from trees and forests. We need to practice the politics of solidarity with non-humans. Of course, there are always difficulties with terminology when discussing non-humans, and solidarity in this context might even sound politically problematic. However, this solidarity is not from above. It's not pity, sympathy, or Christian love. Rather, it is the kind of solidarity that reaches across racial, class, gender, generational lines, and also across the human, non-human divide, solidarity of being present in the other. One example of this kind of solidarity is recent multi-species ethnographic research, which enables humans to envision new ways to comprehend non-humans. Without this understanding, the only common ground that humans and non-humans will have is a planetary future without us. We are tired of trees. We should stop believing in trees, roots, and radicals. Deleuze and Guattari wrote these lines in 1,000 Plateaus, in a paragraph concerning a long-standing model of knowledge as hierarchical and tree-like. This model contrasted with the author's own notion of rhizomatic knowledge. Trees, at least as a philosophical construct, were not something Deleuze and Guattari held in high esteem. They believed trees were ontologically vertical and thus could not represent non-hierarchical knowledge. The other knowledge they spoke of, rhizomatic knowledge, can you move the page a little bit? I'm having trouble seeing.
I'm sorry, I'm not able to move any further, but I can complete the sentence of the other knowledge they spoke of, rhizomatic knowledge, concerned trans-species connections, but was still knowledge.
Produced by and for the human species. To paraphrase Anat Singh, that is actually limitation, as we will never have a chance to become trees. It is less difficult than it may seem to bridge the divide between species. Much recent research has shown that trees have much more in common with human and non-human species than previously thought. The relationship between nature and culture and the so-called division between them has been a major subject of debate through Western history. This endless analysis and negotiation has even been regarded as a kind of conceptual prison. In the Western tradition, this dualism is for the most part rooted in Enlightenment rationalism, where nature is considered other in relation to culture. Many thinkers have recently challenged this assumption through terms like transversality, nature-culture hybridity. Donna Haraway's notion of making kin with the more than human world takes account of the gendered and racialized aspects of the nature-culture dichotomy. Naimanis writes about flat ontology, where nature and culture are flattened into one, which is both destabilizing and liberating. Who is actually given the privilege to speak in the name of natures? What is the right way, and something we call nature? Represent the thing we call nature. What or even who is a tree?
A paradox: in order to preserve nature, humans must protect it, which in many cases means making it inaccessible to other humans, often at the risk of social injustice. Nature reserves around the world are usually based on Western ideas of appreciating nature. These reserves can have adverse consequences for local inhabitants, such as displacement, limiting access to resources, and consequently pushing them into poverty. At the same time, nature is at risk of total destruction at the hands of massive corporations like Rio Tinto, British Petroleum, and ExxonMobil, which regard nature solely as a source of raw material. Forests continue to be cleared, minerals continue to be extracted, and destructive practices like monocropping continue to expand, which in turn causes pollution, the extinction of plants and animals, and poverty and disease among humans. A recent report concludes that humans are driving up to 1 million plant and animal species to extinction at a rate 100 times higher than the average rate of extinction over the past 10 million years. Today, more than 10% of the 80,000 tree species that have been identified are endangered. At least 77 tree species have become extinct in the past 100 years, and over 600 plant species have gone extinct in the last 250 years. The extinction rate is 500 times faster than the rate at which plants would be disappearing without human influence. In the Amazon rainforest alone, if deforestation continues at the current rate, more than half of the 15,000 tree species will likely become extinct.
Who is to blame for this destruction? Is it humanity in general, with its ever increasing material needs satisfied by expanding capitalist production? Or is it the rich and powerful who are most responsible for resource extraction? Andreas Malm argues that we need a new politics of nature and ecology, an antagonistic politics if the current trajectory of extinction and destruction is to be changed. Species thinking on climate change only induces paralysis, asserts Malm. What he means is that the mainstream narrative on ecological destruction, which naturalizes the capitalist mode of production, implies that all of humanity is equally responsible for the destruction of life on the planet, when it is economic elites who consume the most resources by far. Slavoj Žižek similarly argues that ecology is one of today's major ideological battlefields. The nature we encounter, he writes, is always already caught in an antagonistic relationship with human labor. Naomi Klein has argued that climate justice should become an aspect of social justice. This move has the potential to change the meaning of both social and justice. Capitalism prevents any kind of meaningful ecological action simply because it is not profitable. As long as discussions on climate change are attuned to the interests of capital, no significant change will happen.
Many human societies, am I in the right place? Have always had a special
You're in the right place.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Many human societies have always had a special relationship with trees, plants, animals, and other non-human kin. To take trees as an example, people have not only depended on trees for shelter, fuel, and food, but also for medicine and spiritual fulfillment. In many cultures around the world, trees represent an important aspect of communal life. In villages throughout Africa, elders discuss important matters under particular trees, such as baobabs in Madagascar. Until quite recently, in Slovenia, the linden tree symbolized the central space of village communities. In traditional Japanese culture, tree spirits, or kodama, first mentioned in the 8th century Gijiki Chronicle, and holly trees, or shinboku, still play an important role in cultural life. Not only are these trees protected in Japan, but knowledge of the trees that kodama inhabit is very important for many communities, being passed from one generation to another. Trees have also sometimes been declared monuments, signifying important sites, events, and even people. We cannot say that trees are actually aware of the monumentness imposed on them by humans. The same goes for other human concepts applied to trees, such as history. Do trees have history beyond their human-made ones? What could that history be other than the genetic changes trees have undergone since the first Archaeopteris species of proto-tree arose more than 300 million years ago? What is certain is that trees are without a clear division between life and death, between the present and future, at least not in the same way humans understand these concepts. A forest is a complex community where trees make up only a portion of the many species. There are different kinds of forests on the planet, from primeval old-growth forests to commercial forests. Old-growth forests are very diverse, with old and young trees of varying heights clustered unevenly throughout the forest. Such forests are self-sustaining, while commercial forests need constant help from the outside. Unlike humans under capitalism, Trees are not individualistic beings driven by greed to compete with each other for space and resources. Fully grown trees support young seedlings in a shaded understory, while dying trees provide resources for living trees, as well as for fungi, bacteria, bugs, birds, bears, and many other species. When in danger from insect attack or disease, for example, trees also send out distress signals to other nearby trees. Apparently, the trees synchronize their behaviors so that they are all equally successful, and the rate of photosynthesis is the same for all. A group of researchers working in the southwestern Pyrenees recently discovered a complementary relationship between different tree species. For example, between pine and beech trees, where growth of both is reduced when intraspecific competition increases. They also noticed that during extreme drought, the number of individual trees may decrease, but tree communities share resources to stay alive. Scientists have noticed that it is very difficult to distinguish what is actually part of a tree and what is not, as different species crossbreed more than originally thought. Trees form hybrid collectives involving underground mycorrhizal fungi networks that connect trees, roots, and fungi, I don't remember, to one another in a kind of collaborative, self-organized way. This complex assemblage has been termed the Wood Wide Web. These networks distribute sugar, nitrogen, and phosphorus among trees. Some of these networks may be up to 450 million years old. Trees that have access to this network do better. For example, trees connected to mycorrhiza have a higher rate of survival under drought conditions. Suzanne Simard, a leading forest researcher, has pointed out that these networks also have hub trees or mother trees, which can be connected to hundreds of other trees. Cooperation over self-interest helps cooperation over self-interest helps tree communities thrive. I'll stop there.
Forest ecosystems have been affected by trade and transoceanic voyaging for centuries through the introduction of so-called invasive or alien species. Recently, the name New Wild has been used for ecologies created by species that migrate across the globe, losing their habitats and adapting to new ones. Non-human migrants and their impacts on ecosystems can be evaluated in a number of ways. Apart from traditional approaches, which monitor and quarantine pests and harmful organisms, repairing the damage in native forests, more recent approaches are based on different principles, such as critical environmental ethics. The field of environmental ethics explores the relationships between humans and nature, the intrinsic value of nature, and the consequences of anthropocentrism, in other words, the ethical framings of forest health. There are three ethical frameworks often mentioned in the context of environment ethics. Biocentrism, developed by Paul Taylor, is a classic approach to forest health management based on a respect for nature. One tenet of biocentrism is to avoid restricting the freedom of individual organisms to act and develop in their own way. A second framework, called entangled empathy, concerns the relationship between parasites, pests, harmful organisms, and hosts, trees. The disease-causing and the diseased. Developed by Laurie Gruen, entangled empathy is an experimental approach focused on attending to another's experience of well-being, where humans and non-humans are intertwined in an active relationship, and where breaking those ties would mean that our lives would no longer make sense. The third concept is flourishing, based on the work of Angela Kohlhoff, which sees plants as holding moral status due to their ability to flourish. This approach seeks to grant an ethical status to non-humans without anthropomorphizing them. Dipesh Chakrabarti argues that life on this planet also involves the histories and activities of microbial forms of life, of bacteria and viruses, many of which are not friendly to the human form of life. Zoonotic pathogens such as SARS-CoV-2 that spread among humans do not act intentionally, but in response to the disturbance and destruction of their natural ecosystems. One of the primarily reasons for viral outbreaks in recent years is deforestation, especially of tropical forests, which leads humans to come into contact with wild animals, which carry pathogens. But even the idea of wild is wrong in this context. It is a construct of human colonizers who believed they had a right to take land from native inhabitants. That's why it's so important to support the indigenous defense of land and forests. In addition, trees are our allies in climate crisis. Studies have shown that each year forests absorb between 10 and 15% of worldwide carbon emissions. For this reason, 11% of global greenhouse gas emissions can be traced back to deforestation and forest degradation. Account for. The logic is very simple. If forests are destroyed, all life on the planet will sooner or later be gone too. How do we become better at recognizing more than human modes of life without anthropomorphizing non-human life? How do we practice care, freedom, justice, and equality with non-humans? How do we mobilize a broad front to demand more just environmental politics? We should never grow tired of trees, as Deleuze and Guattari did. On the contrary, we should embrace trees. We should speak for them and for nature, not only in spite of, but because of the impossibility of the task, even if it is always destined to fail, as Nemesis writes. Realizing that representation can never really be bypassed, we can only speculate about nature writing itself, is a cultural part of the understanding, non-human beings and our relationship to them.
Thanks, everyone. So that concludes our reading for this week, or for the week. But before we transition on to the sonic composition from Emily, I'm going to spend a little bit of time with an article. So Emily thoughtfully composes all of her sound compositions after research and contemplation, and we'll link some of those pieces in our chat briefly after this. But we want to spend a little bit of time talking about one of those researchers that Emily was looking into this week in terms of her sound composition. And let's see here. This is an article from the Smithsonian titled "Trees Make Noises and Some of Those Sounds Are Cries for Help." It follows research in 2013 with researchers from Grenoble or University in France, where they were able to capture the ultrasonic noise made from bubbles forming inside the trees that are water stressed. Other research before this has shown that that trees do have sonic expression during drought, but this research actually found the very specific ultrasonic noise unique from wood that is drying due to cavitation, which I didn't know that term before, but cavitation occurs when air bubbles form in the xylem that run up and down the tree trunks, causing them to collapse like bubbles in an IV or a bloodstream, preventing water from being pulled upward, which would cause some trees to die. In other words, the scientists from the research were able to record the actual sound of trees crying for water, like slurping for water through a straw and unable to pull any more water from the earth. After this article, I started digging in a little deeper as well, and found another research from the Tel Aviv University in Israel from 2019 that found that plants made sounds at frequencies that humans can't hear, especially when they're stressed with a lack of water or when their stem is cut. It found that insects and some mammals are capable of hearing these ultrasonic sounds and responding. For example, a moth might hear a tree and decide against laying eggs on that plant because it just sounds, it can hear that it's water stress. And so in other words, there's a whole conversation happening within our ecosystems between non-humans that we're simply not privy to. In terms of application from this research, the researchers from France said that one day we could implement a sort of tree stethoscope to listen to the tree's health and diagnose ailments in trees, specifically how close a tree is to dying when it's not getting enough water. And in regions where prolonged droughts are expected as a result of climate change, this research could potentially help triage care for trees and maintaining the health of our forests. And that's exactly what the researchers from the Tel Aviv University did. They were able to train a machine learning model to discriminate between the plant sounds, the wind, the rain, and other noises from their environment where they were capturing their research. And were able to correctly identify, in most cases, whether the plants were stressed that was caused by dryness or a cut based on the sound's intensity and frequency. Very interesting kind of work around this, and directly kind of segues into our next piece, which is Emily's sound composition. So I'll stop sharing and pass it over to you, Emily.
Thanks so much, Kavi. That was so great to hear those deeper points and hear about the research and the crossover with sound. Made me so happy to hear that information. So thanks for sharing with us. I've got my couple things here I'm getting together. Let me just start. So tonight I've got some really interesting materials. I've got pieces of branches from sycamore trees, native sycamore trees that have fallen in my neighborhood along the walks that I do every day. And then we've also got some materials from the metabolic sites. We've got the native cottonwood tree here, and it really smells like the river, like the Los Angeles River. So I'm going to be making some sounds for you tonight using these materials and thinking about the tree having so many different points of contact and different points of transfer of energy, from the rain that falls and the water that is brought into the tree, in addition to any time one of these falls off, that makes a sound as it hits the sidewalk. And we also have, or the ground, or whatever lay beneath the tree. I was also thinking about the sound of the wind and all the sounds really that pass through in the life of the tree. And thinking about how beyond the roots, there's all these other points of life and points of energy. And so I'll be thinking about that with the harmonics tonight too.
Just one more proof that all of these horrors like climate change and loss of biodiversity all stem from our disrespect that nature these horrors like climate change, we disrespect ourselves and create the all stem situations which make it relatively easy for a virus to jump over. We disrespect an animal to create it may create new which make disease. Scientists studying these zoonotic diseases, they've been predicting it for ages. Create a new disease. Scientists studying these zoonotic diseases, they've been predicting it for ages. Just one more proof that all of these horrors like climate change and loss of biodiversity all stem from our disrespect of nature and animals. You know, we disrespect animals and create situations which make it relatively easy for a virus to jump over from an animal to a person. It may create a new disease. The scientists studying these zoonotic diseases, they've been predicting it for ages. Just one more proof that all of these horrors like climate change, loss of biodiversity, all stem from our disrespect of nature and animals. You know, we disrespect animals and create situations which make it relatively easy for a virus to jump over from an animal to a person, and it may create a new disease. The scientists studying these zoonotic diseases, they've been predicting it for ages. Just one more proof that all of these horrors like climate change, loss of biodiversity, all stem from our disrespect of nature and animals. You know, we disrespect animals and create situations which make it relatively easy for a virus to jump over.
Thank you, Emily. That was an amazing sonic journey. I really felt like I was walking through the forest.
Glad to
So-
hear that. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Before we get into discussion, I just want to read a few questions. So when I was preparing for this and writing questions, my brain was kind of going all over the place. So I have the questions grouped in almost 3 kinds of categories. So the first set of questions is about navigating or advocating for non-human life. And how we can do that without falling into the trap of projecting humanness, in other words, anthropomorphizing non-human life forms. And when we think about systems such as the mycorrhizal network and the Wood Wide Web, which is a complex network of collaboration between roots and fungi, how do we justify categorizing roots and fungi as separate organisms while acknowledging the superorganism that they develop? So in other words, when does one species end and another begin? And when is it important to kind of make the distinction between, okay, here's roots and here's fungi, and they're separate organisms? And when is it important to think about them together? Are there a time and place for those distinctions? And then regarding these more than human collectives, what can the life of the forest teach us about commons? Because commons is the guiding question of this syllabus. So where does commons come into this when we think about collective life of the forest? And lastly, I had some questions regarding land management. And my first question is about nature preserves. And I feel that, the author gets into it a little bit, how, okay, maybe they're necessary. But on the other hand, we can see that maybe sometimes they also function as an unjust land enclosure, creating inaccessibility. So how do we kind of navigate thinking about nature preserves and how they might run counter to commoning, but actually they might support the commons? I just would love to hear your thoughts on that. And then how maybe also the land back movement might avoid this problem that the nature preserve issue creates. So these are just some of my thoughts and questions. I will put them in the chat, but yeah, I would love to hear people's thoughts on this. And the floor is open.
I just want to say those are really thoughtful prompts, because a lot of, thoughts came to mind as you were highlighting those issues. So,
thank you.
But I mean, sorry, I can't keep everything in my head. Oh, thank you for putting it in the, in the chat.
It's a lot also. I tried to keep, I was like trying to write one question and then I was like, I have 1,000 questions and there's a lot of different things we could talk about. And also if somebody has something to bring up that has nothing to do with anything I said at all, please do that. Like whatever comes to mind from this text.
I mean, the problem you had to try to parse out separate questions is just reflective of the problem we have trying to grapple with these issues, because if you have a worldview which like objectifies the outside world as sort of these things that we can put into little silos and examine and study in microscopes, and then it just is requires us to contort ourselves and create artificial delimiters on questions. But really, if we have a worldview that is more like the indigenous people have, which is systemic and which completely accepts the interdependency and interlinking of everything, then we wouldn't torture our minds with these parsed out questions that are almost, impossible to like see in isolation. So it's a worldview problem, I think, overall in addressing this. And that's what comes to mind. Like, you talked about the mycorrhizal fungi network and how do you individuate root from fungi and the metastructure of the tree. I mean, that's a non-question if your worldview sees the tree as a being, a spirited being whose entire organism is linked to the minerals in the soil and to the atmosphere and the earth and everything. But as soon as you make it a woody structure with lignin and carbon and nitrogen, then it just is a whole different animal. Then you have to contort these questions like, excuse me, this part of the root is a mycelium and this part is a root and this part, it's, what's the point?
So I just came to something really interesting today about Ecuador. Apparently Ecuador is the only country in the world so far that has established nature as an entity in front of the law. So there's something called Pachamama, I think, if I remember the name correctly, which is this big entity, and definitely has spiritual dimension to it as well, and definitely also has to do with like the indigenous view that is quite strong and present in Ecuador. But the interesting thing is, what is the consequence of establishing nature as an entity in front of the law that has also rights similar to what humans would have? And so it's apparently a really a big kind of conflict that seems to be starting to play out actually in front of court. So far, I think that law is only a few years old, so it hasn't really played out very much, but apparently there's a big copper mine that is trying to be developed in an extremely pristine forest area. And so this kind of, this is starting to play out in of course, in a very human entity of a court, but at the same time, trying to give nature some version of a standing. It's on some level, it's very strange, but on another level, maybe, this is a really important step to give nature, to give it some standing in this human, way of dealing. I just thought it was really interesting.
I'm thinking about what you've said about interdependency and the separation. When do we look at them separately, these kind of things. But what keeps coming back to me is, do the trees need us? You know, it's more, seems to be what we want from the trees. And of course, we can't know whether, I mean, I guess from all of these studies, we can know more about what trees need, but I have a feeling they don't need us. They can be here without us and survive without us and do their thing without us. That's all that's just not all, but one of the things I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment. And I don't believe that the trees per se need us, but I do believe in an entangled existence where this is where the idea of solidarity posed by Pisker comes into play, where she says solidarity of being with, being in, being together with the other. And this idea that maybe it's not some kind of hierarchical dependency of, oh, we need this and then this and then this, but rather that we're all kind of interconnected, like how the fungi and the roots are intertwined, and thinking about things in terms of those scales of, no, the trees perhaps don't need us, but I think Emily just put it in the chat. Trees want a healthy ecosystem, and we should want that too. And we belong to the same ecosystem, despite what the nature culture divide produced by capitalism makes us feel. And so this idea of entanglement, I think, is a really powerful concept when we think about calming and what it means to acknowledge collectives that extend beyond human life and non-life.
I think another interesting question here is like who us is when we're asking if the trees need us. If we're talking about us, capitalist society that uses them as a resource, maybe they don't need us. They'd be better off without us. But I think also thinking about trying to learn from different indigenous leaders and cultures who talk about important interdependencies, where there are generations and generations and generations of relationships where trees do need that us. And just like that us needs those trees, that they've built healthier relationships that where that interdependency is needed, like in California with so many indigenous cultures here who were actively what me as a white person might call managing ecosystems here. It's a term I really detest, like managing this. But working with kin, with one another, and living with, and then the question of need becomes a different one, at less of a, and more of a web, more of a kinship, as one might need an uncle, one might need a sibling in a different way than whether it's like what science might call like symbiotic or whatever. But I think asking who the S's are is important.
So just to amplify on that, maybe instead of the word need is, can trees benefit from our good care and our good relationship? And I think about in Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, and how the sweetgrass grew better when the indigenous people actually harvested it and, pruned it and those kinds of things. So there can be this beneficial relationship between this interspecies beneficial relationship.
This is reminding me, this conversation, of a text we will be reading further down the line called Matters of Care. And it's about the ways that we can care for soil. And I think the question of care in the commons and the way that care, I don't want to say is universal, but care, I just think it's interesting to think about care as something radical that is a principle of commoning when you really boil it down to what the essence of the commons is.
I'm struck even by the word need, because the sense of need in indigenous worldviews is that the trees are the source of life, and we are lesser beings or later beings. Our lives are grafted onto their lives, whereas the capitalist notion of need is, what resource can it provide us? And they would like to quantify it in terms of, shade value, hydration value, carbon sink value, and all of those things. That's a completely mechanistic and capitalistic view of the value of trees, and is completely contrasting with the sense of a spirited being that is sacred and that we are sort of living in the inheritance of. So that word need needs to be parsed out, I guess.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you mentioned, Ansu, and the last few comments have just really resonated for me. I just wanted to share a thought I had while I was hearing it. It's one of those moments where you have a familiar thought and you realize, like, oh yeah, I believe that. And my thought just now was that, I really see, when I think of where do I come from in the universe? How did I get here? Where am I? I realize this is like an inherent belief that I came from vegetation and stardust, like the planets, crashing together and creating these physics, these situations, and then from these explosions in space, out of the stardust comes trees. And so I think of, trees as this hereditary, that's just where I believe I come from. And so I think that's part of the care that I feel and that I smell when I come into a forest, that feeling of home, like I came from here. And so I just wanted to share that feeling of love for the environment and the kind of humility of being able to step back and appreciate those kinds of moments.
Yeah, Emily and Izzy, you said something about nature culture divide. The point of view that Emily has just said has never left the indigenous worldview, because they're embedded on Earth. Whereas I wouldn't give the nature culture divide, attribute it to capitalism. I would attribute it to something far more ancient, and that is the sense of self-consciousness that human beings have as a species, and which people theorize sets us off differently from every other species on the planet. And that self-awareness leads to these kinds of egoic sort of representations. And so our culture of living in groups, linguistic groups and survival groups, our culture itself is an ecology unto itself, because we have to survive around other people. And that in a way separates us from nature. And I think this extreme sort of separation that we have now is a culmination of thousands of years of a human centric. It's a manifestation of our brain, and how we're able to kind of separate ourselves and live in a kind of a human ecology.
I think it is just in the brain in a way, because the truth is that we're always in nature, right? We're a part of it and we're in it all the time. And we're in sometimes what humans have done to nature, but it's still nature. Isn't the planet nature? Or is that a simplistic view? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it makes me think of the difference between the planet and the world, and where one might begin and where one might end. And yeah.
I wanted to add that I think, well, I've been living on a land that has acres of old growth coast live oaks that are endangered by development that's going on here. And myself and others in our community have rallied together to protect these trees. And through this kind of creating of community around them, there's been so much education about trees that people seem to be really resonating with, things that we do workshops here about the trees. And we also, this month, we're doing a Kumiai Belotas acorn ceremony here. And it's always very encouraging to me to have the community here kind of opening themselves to the importance of this place. And that's all done through education. So I think humans have a big role in protecting old growth forests, young forests, any forests. So yeah, I think I just wanted to talk about that protective quality that humans can offer trees.
I'm thinking from your comments, Walker, I'm thinking about the book by the German forester Peter Wohlleben. Has anyone read the book or heard of it? It basically, there's a children's edition and an adult edition. The children's edition is very anthropomorphized, but it draws comparisons between sort of the trunk and the of the tree and the skin of the human being. And so it brings children to a vision or a viewpoint that shows them that the tree has sensitivities and weaknesses, just like they would if they were hurt or things like that. And The Secret Life of Trees, I think, is the name of the book. But the adult edition has also just, like Suzanne Simard's book, created an awareness that this is a complex, talking, interacting being, and that they are constantly aware of things affecting them. And it's not just old growth forest that he talks about, but also urban trees, and sort of the stress, for example, that all night street lights put on trees because they think it's daylight, and they're churning their sugar, and they're using their vascular system in ways that they should not if it was a dark night. So just reducing the sort of modern Western education focus on science and tech and finances and computers and things like that, and increasing a little bit just an awareness of nature and how we're, linked to nature and how nature works, just might do wonders,
Yeah, it really does. In fact, somebody actually last night on a Moonlight Hike suggested that book to me. So it's interesting that you're mentioning it today. I must really have to read that book.
Well, it's 4 minutes till 7. We're trying to stay on schedule. This series finishing at 7. So if anyone has any final comment, one singular, feel free to share now.
I really like that what you put in the chat about Kodama. That's amazing that if we can see the spirit in a tree, that's tremendous.
Yeah, I love the idea of Kodama. You can feel it.
I had a quick comment or a thought, I guess, about kind of artificial borders that we as humans have kind of imposed on the world. Not just kind of boundaries between countries, but also roads and fences and other ways we've kind of sanctioned off private property, or even like the barriers that were imposed on the natural world, like kind of our dominance and desire to separate spaces and like, you know, saying quote unquote, this is quote unquote space for nature, or this is space for humans. And even the ways that we've created so many different boundaries between countries that disrupting migration patterns for so many different animals, and even development has relegated animals to very certain, or, you know, a lot of species to very specific areas that they might not have once lived in, but even are encroaching on their spaces. We're not really thinking about that, especially where we're replacing these unnatural, you know, ways that benefit, or systems that would benefit us, like infrastructure, but it's also cutting off so many different ways of living for non-humans.
You got your warning bell, Emily?
I'm like, Marley.
Thank you for the final performance, Emily. Appreciate that. And thank you everyone for coming tonight, and Kavi for screen sharing, and Cindy and Jen for hosting this Zoom, and really excited for next week. I believe we will be reading Donna Haraway, Staying with the Trouble, reading about making kin. And yeah, so excited and hope to see all your faces next week. Have a nice week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you. Thank you,
everyone.
Jen.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Kavi.
Jen.
Thanks,
Thanks, Kavi.
Thanks, Kavi.
The music.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Susie. Thanks for
That
being
was
here.
great. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Hi,
June.
June.
Want to say bye? No? I guess
Bye,
not.
Jen.
Bye, everyone.
They said bye.
Bye.